How one man gave away $300 billion out of guilt. Welcome back. Imagine building an empire so vast that at its peak you control more money than the U.S. government itself, only to spend your final decades frantically giving it all away, not because you were generous, but because you were haunted by guilt. That's the story of Andrew Carnegie, the Steel King of America, who rose from a penniless immigrant to one of the richest men in history, only to die desperately trying to cleanse his conscience with philanthropy. Carnegie's life began far from the smokestack of Pittsburgh. Born in 1835 in a cramped, one-room weaver's cottage in Dunfermline, Scotland, Andrew was the son of a poor handloom weaver and a mother who sold small goods to keep the family afloat. His childhood was marked by hunger, debt, and uncertainty. At the age of 13, the Carnegies crossed the Atlantic in search of a better life, settling in Allegheny, Pennsylvania. It wasn't glamorous. Andrew's first job was in a cotton factory, where he worked 12-hour days as a bobbin boy for $1.20 a week. He later said the memory of carrying oil lamps to light the factory floor and being covered in dust and grease never left him. But even then, Carnegie had two traits that would define his career: relentless ambition and a knack for seeing opportunity where others saw only hardship. He educated himself through books borrowed from a local benefactor's library, a privilege that stuck with him so deeply he'd later create thousands of libraries across the world. By 18, he was working as a telegraph operator, memorizing the locations of every train in the Pittsburgh system, and soon he impressed railroad executives enough to land a job under Thomas A. Scott of the Pennsylvania Railroad, a mentorship that became his ticket out of poverty. Carnegie's first real taste of wealth came during the Civil War. While the nation bled, Carnegie was helping to build iron bridges and investing in sleeping cars, oil, and telegraph lines. He had a keen eye for spotting the future, and he saw it in steel. By the 1870s, he had thrown himself entirely into the steel industry, a sector most businessmen avoided because of its risks. But Carnegie mastered a revolutionary new method from Britain called the Bessemer process, which could turn iron into steel faster and cheaper than ever before. By driving down costs and relentlessly reinvesting profits, Carnegie Steel quickly became the titan of American industry. By 1899, the company was producing more steel than all of Great Britain. Yet Carnegie's rise wasn't built on kindness. Behind the image of the cheerful Scotsman who quoted Shakespeare and professed belief in peace, there was steel, cold, hard, and ruthless. He was obsessed with efficiency, demanding longer hours and lower wages from his workers, many of whom toiled in dangerous, sweltering conditions for barely enough to feed their families. The clash between Carnegie's idealistic words and his harsh business practices reached its breaking point in 1892 at the infamous Homestead Strike. That year, Carnegie's partner Henry Clay Frick cut wages at the Homestead Steel Works. When workers refused, Frick locked them out and called in 300 armed Pinkerton detectives to break the strike. A violent battle erupted, leaving at least 10 dead and dozens wounded. Carnegie, conveniently abroad in Scotland at the time, claimed innocence, but the public knew he had approved the plan. His reputation as a friend of the working man was shattered. The image of blood on the steel magnate's hands never fully washed away. By the turn of the century, Carnegie was at the top of the world. In 1901, he sold Carnegie Steel to J.P. Morgan for $480 million, roughly $15 billion today. Overnight, he became the richest man alive. But here's where the story twists. Instead of sitting back to enjoy his wealth, Carnegie turned to giving it away, obsessively. He built libraries, universities, museums, and foundations, eventually donating over 90% of his fortune. By the time of his death in 1919, he had given away what would be the equivalent of over $300 billion in today's money. Why? Some say it was vision, his belief in the gospel of wealth, his famous essay where he argued that the rich had a duty to act as stewards of society's fortune. But others say it was guilt, pure and simple. The Homestead Strike haunted him. The sight of workers dying while he became richer gnawed at his conscience. Giving away money wasn't just generosity, it was penance. Carnegie's legacy is complicated. On one hand, millions of people have benefited from his philanthropy. If you've ever stepped into a public library, studied in a university lecture hall, or listened to a symphony orchestra, you may have touched Carnegie's vision. On the other hand, his fortune came at the cost of thousands of workers who suffered under his system. He lived in luxury while his employees risked death for a few dollars a day. The lesson? Carnegie shows us a paradox of extreme wealth. You can be both a builder of progress and a breaker of man. You can donate fortune to humanity while denying fair pay to those who made that fortune possible. Carnegie's life forces us to ask, is philanthropy noble if it's born from guilt? Or should justice come before generosity? What we can't deny is his influence. Without Andrew Carnegie, America's skyline might not gleam with steel, and millions of students might never have held a library card. He reshaped both industry and philanthropy forever. But in the quiet moments of his later years, when the crowds were gone and the headlines faded, one wonders if Andrew Carnegie, the richest man of his age, ever truly felt rich in spirit. If you enjoyed this story, leave a money bag in the comments.